Okay, so Chaim, at Chaim's request, I figured we will pick up where we left off with the weirdest halacha, arguably, in all of Tazria-R.J. So what is the weirdest halacha in all of Tazria-R.J, Chaim?
If a guy becomes fully afflicted by tzaraat, he's now pure. And then if he has regular flesh that shows up.
Very good. Very good. So I don't even think this is arguable. I mean, I know everything is arguable, what's the weirdest, but I honestly think that this is the weirdest, which is V'im parach tefrach tzaraat tahor tzaraat et kol or hanega mirosho vad raglav l'chol marein kohen. Right, after telling you that even the slightest little nega of whatever color makes you tamei, but if the Kohen sees that he's covered from head to toe, every single inch of flesh, vira'ah HaKohen, v'hinei chisitat tzaraat et kol bisaro, v'tihar et hanaga, kulo apach lavan tahor-hu. Then he will declare him tahor, for he has turned completely white. And when does he become tamei? Uviyom hera'od bo basar chai, Yitma, when he sees live flesh, then he will become tamei. Vira'ah going to basar chai v'timoa basar chai tamehu tzara'adu. Right? Now this is weird on so many levels. It's weird because it's counterintuitive, because a little bit of tzara'at makes you tamei, so a lot of tzara'at should make you more tamei, not less. It's weird that healing somehow makes you tamei. Linguistically, it's odd. Because how do they describe what makes you tamei? Basar chai, right? Like death is the avi avot hatuma in Torah, right? That's the halachic language, right? The father of fathers of tuma, right? It makes people tamei. It makes things av hatuma that can make other things tamei, right? The metal that's used to kill someone is avi avodat tamachal, it's matami ba'ohel, it's matami there, right? Mavet is the avi avot hatuma, but here it's chai. If there is living flesh, so then it is tamei, which is just bizarre, right? There is like everything about this. Everything about this halacha is just odd. And it just requires you to analyze it. Now, you could just look at this and say, Haraya, Tzaraat is weird. Yeah, exactly. It's Gzeira Katuv, it's Gzeira Sakusiv, right? I have no idea what it means. It's not a skin malady. If it was a skin malady, then the more it spreads, right? Like, can you imagine the equivalent in like a disease? Oh, a small tumor, well, that is dangerous. But if it's metastasized to your entire body, so then you're fine, right? No, that's when the person is dead, right? That's dead, untreatable, stage 4, right? Metastatic cancer, like, right? So you could just say, Haraya, this is not a physical malady, it is a spiritual malady, right? And it makes no sense, and it's you could just do that. And I will admit that there is much to invite, just sort of throwing your hands up in the air and saying, I have no idea what's going on. However, you always need to be careful with halacha, how much, obviously there's always this attempt to read halacha, right, to A, get at the Tama mitzvah, or B, to read certain halachot as metaphorical or symbolic, right, and that derives our halacha. I don't think it's surprising that on this particular halacha, the intuition of many of the mafarshim that there must be some sort of symbolic meaning here, right? Sometimes you don't understand why you're doing that, right? You're like, okay, this is a halacha, you want to read it metaphorically, that's very nice, but like the pshat is the pshat, right? Here, you sort of understand why everyone who wants to make sense of it is going to look for some sort of metaphorical explanation. So Chaim had one yesterday. Chaim, what was your suggestion yesterday?
I was leading based off of the shot you made yesterday from the
Uri Shirki.
Yeah. That it seems that this transformation, it's like a culmination of a transformation from going from a ish to a ish Tzaraat or a.
Right. So Reb Chaim had an interesting theory, right? Which is as we noticed yesterday, that the progression of Tzaraat, the human being slowly disappears. Right. You could come up with quite the chiddush, which is, but if he completely becomes the nega, right, becomes right kulo apach lavan, so he's sort of lost his humanity, right? So, and only human beings, right, can become, right, there needs to be a human to have the tzaraat. And as it were, right, at some point if it takes him over, the nega has taken over, but there's nobody left for the tumah to adhere to, right, as it were, right? Meaning, if you follow this progression, you say that right, the nega makes the person tameh. That only makes sense if there's a person with a nega. If there's a nega, right, and that's it, right? At some level, it's as if it's like disembodied, right? It is like, and you do actually get mefarshim that go in this type of direction. If you look around, right, saying like, yeah, this is evidence of it being, in a certain sense, disembodied. The Kliyakar, who in general is a bit more homiletic, right? Like Darshani, right? Like that's his style, if you know the Kliyakar at all. This is like the type of thing he jumps on. But in this case, he has Chazal. Because Chazal don't always do homiletics like this, but here they clearly looked at this and said, okay, there's something deep and profound going on here at a homiletical level. And the Gemara, thank you for getting me the Gemara, though I now see he quotes it in full, right, has the following drash. Ein Mashiach ba ad shetitapech kol hamalchut leminut. The Gemara and Chelek uses this pasuk as proof that Mashiach will not come until the Malchut, right, until the kingdom is 100% heretical. Until it is filled with 100% unadulterated heresy. Liminut shene'emar, kulo hafach lavan, tahor-hu. Okay, that is the proof of the Gemara, is that at some point you are so far gone, right? Now, what does that mean? So, I think you look at this Gemara, the first, perhaps, homiletic direction that seems to emerge from the Gemara is a very, sort of a very negative spin on this, which is, there are people who have hope, and there are people who have no hope. And when there is no hope, you then need a magical salvation, right? Meaning, if there's a bunch of heresy and a bunch of maminim, so you guys can work it out together. You can work it out yourself, right? But if you get to the point where there's only heresy, then you can no longer save yourself. So God has to swoop in, send Mashiach, and he will extricate you from this situation. And with that, you could look at this and say that's what Chazal saw here, which was, it's not that you're actually tahor. It's like, if you've gotten to the point where, let's say, you spiritually deserve to be kulo hafach lavan, God needs to sort of magically come in and give you hope again, right? And at which point you start to heal, so then you can return to the world of a person who can have an ega, and then you deal with the normal things. The Kliyakar takes it as follows. He says, "V'im patotisa zeh siman she'en koach b'yad hateva lidchot me'alav kol hapsolet ki ravu ze gam gen mofet shel izam mecheto o tumatovo v'im lo baz hanega kvar dacha me'alav hateva kol lipush u'psolet zeh mofet ki kvar gamar bilo l'shuv b'tshuva shlema." So, right, he says, first of all, right, this is not really Yad HaTeva, right, this must be spiritual, right, and like following Chazal in that sense. and you start healing when you do tshuva and things like that. But then he says, "V'im chisitah tzaraat et kol or hanega." If tzaraat covers your whole body, mirosho v'ad raglav, kvar dacha hateva kol hacholi lachut. He says it's as if, right, there's normally some sort of interaction between the spiritual and the physical here, but when your entire body is covered in tzaraat, he says, again, it's very fascinating how he takes it. He says, it's kvar dacha hateva kol hacholi lachut. It's like before there was like a mix of a physical malady, a spiritual malady. When it covers your whole skin, it's as if nature has shoved the whole malady out. It is out, right? The natural component, which is mixed in here, is out, right? It has now covered you. And therefore, since the natural body has like pushed it out, you will now eventually heal. Okay, right? So his first one is say on the physical level, it's like, I don't know, it's like that last fever, right? As your fever breaks, right? It's like your body makes a last push to get out of an illness. You are like shaking in bed with 104 fever under the covers, right? And you wake up the next morning and you're ready to go to work, right? So on the natural level, like this, sometimes, right, the end is like the body is like figuring things out and eventually pushes it out, right? But he says, but let's move to the metaphorical. He says, look, maybe it's like this. If tzaraat comes because of a punishment, as a punishment, so if you only have a little bit, so what do people say? Oh, it's not so bad, some a little bit bad, everyone's a little bit bad, right? When it covers you entirely, right, there's like that moment where people reach the lowest of the low, and they realize, I really got to turn my life around, or this is the end, right? Az bioter yigmor b'libo lashuv b'tshuva zulat b'im yebo basar chai. Said, at a certain level, the conviction that you actually are bad is what will drive you to tshuva. But if you see a redeeming quality, psychologically, it's harder to do tshuva than when you see no redeeming quality in yourself. Right? He's like, one of the things that keeps us from doing tshuva is the fact that, yes, I have a temper, but I'm also so generous to my friends. Right? Or, yes, I wake up for davening late, but that's because, but I learned so well. Right? But if you don't learn and don't daven and you're a terrible person, everybody hates you, your family, and you have no friends, right? So either you can just say the whole world is evil, or at some point you're just like, I'm a bad person, right? And there's ironically more hope, right? It's lahavdil, the way some of the Mepharshim say, that the reason the Asham Talui costs so much money, right? The carbon you bring when you might have done an Aveira, and in many ways is more severe than the Chatat, right? The definite sin offering, is because if you sinned, so you have to fix something. But if you might have sinned, it's very hard to get someone to do tshuva for something they might have done, right? Because, maybe I did, maybe I didn't, not so bad, right? So the Torah doubly slaps you with it, so that it reminds you, no, right? You really do need to do tshuva. So he says, "Rechazal and shilu davar l'mayim shekomayim rechavim and amokim and rechavim." And he says the mashal is as follows: water can either be, right? Is usually either a small body of water which is very deep or big and shallow. Said kach manega ina rachav azum yichnas beomek toch haguf v'yechavot l'gabrot acholi aval l'rochav itbashet b'chol orein amok b'gov b'irapei meira. Said, right, another mashal to understand it, right? So he has a few levels here, right? One is at the physical level. Your body is finishing up. Second, at a spiritual level, when you realize you have no redeeming qualities, that's when you do tshuva. Third, which I'm not sure if he thinks this is the same as the second or not, is one deep flaw, in many ways, is harder to extricate than like general spiritual shallowness. Then he quotes the Gemara that I just said about Mashiach. And how does he understand it? He says, and that's right what I said before, which is the fourth way of reading this, as we said before, was no. At some point, you just have no hope. It's not a sign of Tara. It's a sign of literally a deus ex machina, right? Right, which people forget actually comes from. What does it mean? You did this in literature, right? It means like something like a surprise healing, but what does it literally mean? The first word there is from God. D-E-U-S, right? Right? Deus. Right? It's God, right? Right? It's a surprise always from God. God is always the one who can pull that off, right? That's the point. But then he sort of backtracks and integrates this into his earlier ones, which is, no, maybe what we said about the individual is true of the nation. That when we all realize we're terrible, then we'll do tshuva. The last one, which he says here as well, and the drush I was writing up from Rabbi Price this week is devoted completely to this shot, which is, maybe the symbolism here is that the worst possible person you could have is a charlatan. It's someone who is evil and presents himself as evil, might be bad, but he's not going to lead anyone else astray. But if someone is evil but can present himself as good, that's much more dangerous. So if there's a little bit of chai, a little bit of live flesh, right, that's more dangerous, right? Someone who's like a total miscreant, right? Nobody wants to be like them, right? But a person who donates a lot of money to charity with the money that he got illegally, right? People sometimes are like, how bad could it really be? He's funding cancer research, We don't have to get actual names in this, but you get it. So those are a few possibilities, but I think, again, the reason I think there are all these metaphorical possibilities being thrown around is because it is so weird. So just the different ones we saw. Chaim's shot, which is if you view Tzaraat as a person with an ega, maybe when it comes completely, it's as if the human has disappeared, so there's no one to be tamei. Maybe this is getting at the idea that there comes a point where you need sort of outside help, right, from God, and this is just magic. It could be that this is implying the unique problems of hypocrisy and charlatanism, right, where it's at some level better to be totally bad, right, than to be able to pretend that you're good. It could be about yourself in terms of tshuva, either at a national or personal level, that at some level, those redeeming qualities, not they trick others, they trick you, right, and prevent you from really feeling bad. At the physical level, the Kli Yakar suggests that maybe it's like that end of illness fever that just gets it out of your system. So those are just a few of the metaphorical possibilities. But like I said, I think it sort of begs itself to something. So those are just some of the possibilities. Okay.